Another, let's say another good one about government overreach, the FOIA lawsuit coming out of, I'm going to get the districts mixed up. I know that the FOIA request is for correspondence between the Pennsylvania government and the federal government. It
happens to be that the Pennsylvania health official is now the federal health official. So that, that there's an interesting overlap. This is the, what's Levine?
Rachel Levine, who is also transgender, I believe. And yes. Another thing which I don't make fun of people for, period. I'll make fun of them for the terrible work they do as elected officials. And that's legit because that's what they're there for.
This is the official who got their own mother out of a nursing home right before Pennsylvania instituted its let's send all the COVID infected patients back to the nursing homes. And what it is like Michigan, like New York, it appears Pennsylvania was playing games with what documentation and information they were giving to the feds. And for people who don't remember or are unaware, both Michigan and New York are under federal investigation over whether or not they falsified documents and information to the feds because they didn't want the Trump administration to know how bad their COVID policy in nursing homes is working. Credit to Jack Posobiec, who's now at Human Events, also at One America News Network, also a Claremont Fellow, who was one of the first people to document and detail this in the court of public opinion. He was talking about this back in April and May of last year.
And just so everybody appreciates this, because I don't think people know, or they may have forgotten, because at the time I was paying, it didn't mean as much to me then as it does now. Rachel Levine took her mother out of a long-term healthcare facility, put her in private care, while implementing policy that, but we don't know yet because Pennsylvania is sort of a little bit behind the curve, or behind the the transparency front compared to Michigan and New York. New York, we know what happened. We know what Cuomo did. How that was not the end of his political career and the beginning of his, potentially other criminal career is beyond me. Whatever. We know what happened in New York. We're now discovering Charlie LaDuff. Anybody who doesn't know him, follow him. Great show. He's got the No BS Hour on Facebook. He's been doing the God's work with Michigan's Whitmer and uncovering the fact that they may have underreported their long-term healthcare facility deaths by twofold, or underrepresented by half. It's twice what they've been reporting. And why is that relevant? Well, it's relevant. Some people are going to say, what difference does it make if they died here or died there? And I said in my analysis, when you're trying to identify the source of an outbreak in a pandemic, it kind of does matter where the people who are dying are coming from. And Michigan's reason for why they didn't determine that they were coming from long-term healthcare facilities, it was too arduous and painstaking to determine who died in hospital, where they came from. Bullcrap, but whatever. So that's New York and Michigan. It seems like Pennsylvania is right on the same track, but we're a little bit further behind because they've been refusing to communicate documents, which is now the object of this FOIA request. Another good short lawsuit. Bottom line, they're asking for, who's the plaintiff in that again? I forgot now.
Oh, it's again Judicial Watch. Tom Fitton. They were real active this week. They were filing suits all over the place. So they were doing yeoman's work. For people who don't know, Judicial Watch and Tom Fitton in particular were the ones that outed Clinton, the Clinton email scandal, which they only found out about and was uncovered because of all their FOIA requests. They love, and it's another reminder to everybody out there. I had a hush hush at Viva BarnesLaw.locals.com, which was a lot of the great information and intel that's in that first one, and that will be in future ones about 9/11, came out of FOIA requests. People who found out all kinds of interesting things. So it's a reminder. It's a white pill to remember that, ordinary people using the Freedom of Information Act are the ones that often uncloak all kinds of interesting things about the government. And this is going right to the heart of what exactly was disclosed. Also, it shows the conflict. Biden put in charge of a key position of public health in the federal government an official who should be under investigation for what they did when they were in the Pennsylvania government. And now they're apparently hiding information in their role as a federal official from the Freedom of Information Act scrutiny. So it's also another place where Republicans were useless, but that's another story for another day.
And this is something interesting for people to appreciate. And people are going to jump on. There's a number of, I don't want to call it conspiratorial thoughts one can have. There's a number of questions one can have. Did Biden hire or appoint this person, Rachel Levy, because of what she did, or just being totally oblivious to what she did because it would look good on paper for him to appoint a transgender official to his administration? He'll get to check off one of the identity politics box, and he had no idea of what had been going on under her supervision. And now that it's going to come to the forefront, they're going to do their best to hide it because they don't want to show the fact that they basically, what's the word when you give someone a better, they promoted someone who was not just incompetent, but might be responsible for thousands of deaths as a direct result of their policy. So you don't know which way to go with this, but either way, it's bad. And the bottom line is, I'm more inclined to think Joe Biden quite literally has a checklist of diversity. He wants to pick certain candidates based on entirely superficial attributes, just so he can say that he does it. And then when the stuff starts coming out, then it's damage control because you can't fire them right away, although it might lead to Rachel being dismissed, demoted, whatever. But now it's a fight for the government to hide its own wrongdoing, to protect its own reputation. And it's just the idea that you make a request, and they made the request months ago and don't get any response. And these are issues of national importance, of public health, of policy. If you know that the outbreaks and the spreads are coming or it's originating in long-term healthcare facilities, maybe you don't need to lock down the entire province or the entire state and shut down small business. Maybe you just need to focus on where it's coming from. But you don't know it because you don't look into it or you don't do whatever. And then you try to obstruct any attempt of actual reporters and actual journalists and actual people who are trying to make the world a better place. You try to obstruct their efforts to do so. That's the stank of corruption of government, and it's terrible. How does it work with these things? The government's going to piss and moan, drag its feet, but a judge is going to say, communicate the documents?
I think so, because the grounds to withhold this documentation is pretty weak. So this is not like a legal eagle FOIA suit. This is a very Judicial Watch has a long history of winning these suits. They don't win them all, but they win a bunch of them. And from my review of it, they got strong ground. It's not like they're asking for national security. So these records are records that really should be turned over, should be publicly known, and should be fully vetted and disclosed to the world. I mean, and the fact that they're delaying and stalling means there's information in there that makes key Biden officials look bad because they were once the Pennsylvania officials.
And it's terrible. Everybody should appreciate what they were doing. They knew, but at one point in time, they knew that by bringing in COVID positive patients to nursing homes, it was bad and it was causing problems. They knew that they could not do enough in these nursing homes to segregate sections, to have floors for COVID positive patients, because like Charlie LaDuff discovered through his research in Michigan, they had separate floors. The staff were intermingling in the kitchens. They were, they knew what they were doing was killing people, and they didn't stop doing it. And then they refused to disclose the information. They further hid it, and they further apparently might have falsified documents, at least in New York and Michigan. And they probably did the same thing in Pennsylvania. And then they turn around, cripple the entire state, cripple the entire nation, and try to pass the blame onto other people for political purposes. It's disgusting. There's no other word for it. And the truly disgusting thing about it is that there will probably be no meaningful repercussions for the responsible officials, and people are just going to forget about it and go back to the easy thing to blame Orange Man bad. It's all his fault, and all these other politicians get a pass.
Well, it's one of our locals' questions was, will the Third Circuit ever rule on the Stickman decision? Probably sometime in the next century. But it turns out, if the state of Pennsylvania had to follow his decision and the logic it would have ultimately led to, none of this may have been here. And ironically, corrupt Pennsylvania politicians might have had their record covered up for them. The way Wisconsin Supreme Court prevented the Wisconsin governor from making mistakes, they could have also done the same in Pennsylvania had they actually abided by Judge Stickman's ruling. But it's also, though, it is a broader pattern. Everybody that's from a state that was a big lockdown state, New York, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and California, is facing political blowback, whereas politicians and governors who decided not to follow lockdown laws for the most part, such as in Florida and Texas, are experiencing record approval ratings. So I think that this may continue to blow back, and especially in light of new information that, apparently Biden was originally trying not to do an investigation into the origin of COVID-19. And that was also a hush-hush from several weeks, maybe a month or so ago, that was about where this COVID-19 came from. And you can go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com and watch that hush-hush along with some others if you want. But basically, Biden's been forced to re-examine his desire to shut down that inquiry. And if I was Fauci, I'd be looking at vacation plans in Brazil right about now.